Yo, 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 visualize shark takes, hit the wave grinding. In the chat, gun shark odds make it rhyming. Sunday vibes, smooth bets, no confining. Hats engaged, can't stop us from shining. Bet on the spread, liking it, keep it tight. Push the odds further, jack on the hindsight. Odds fellows mind grasping the right sight. Hats, caps on heads, winners in plain sight. Hit the light, get in the chat, feel the flow, cash it, every dollar see the bankroll. Sunday grinding picks, now you gotta know. Extra points on the screen, sharp minds always glow. Big parlays, predictions we hold. Standing tall, betting knowledge all.
On a suddenly not so casual Sunday in October, it is NFL Sunday, the extra points, the big show. Week 7, the Shark and the Gun, right here live on Sharky Waters Nation and the Guns Picks channel, X and YouTube. Come on over to the chat, get a drink, get a cup of coffee, take a breath with us. A lot of conversation on deck here. Guns Picks, what's going on, brother?
Man, it is a beautiful Sunday. We've been cooking in the NFL. I don't know if anybody's been following along. We're coming off the sweep on Thursday Night Football. Now we're running it back here for the Sunday edition of NFL Week 7. I'm excited to get into it because NFL's been very, and I mean very, good to me. We got plenty of plays. We got a lot of collabs, and I can't wait to break it down with everybody in the chat. Sean Miller, Chris Beauvais, and the Candyman have already started things off. Get into the chat. Talk to us. We will talk to you. Let's get it.
1 o'clock in Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Fox Sports, Seahawks traveling to the Falcons. Outer division football, a lot to discuss. One of 4 collaboration officials on this Week 7 broadcast. Guns Picks, Seattle +3 official.
Yeah, we've been fading Seattle first the last couple of weeks. Why? Because of the 3 games in 11 days. Now they're out of that window, and now we can see this team turn up. You got Seattle, like I said, back-to-back losses. Coming out some good teams, by the way. We're talking Detroit, San Francisco. Last one was San Francisco on Thursday Night Football, so they're coming with extra rest into this game. And then you have an Atlanta team that's off back-to-back NFC South wins, big wins in the division. So maybe a little bit of a flat spot we're seeing here with the Falcons today. We shall see. Seattle, great offense. No question about it. 11th in pass DVOA, 8th in rush DVOA. They're ranked 6th in pass completion rate as well, 68.9%. And then you got Atlanta defense that is ranked 22nd in defensive pass DVOA, 18th in defensive pass rush this year. They are ranked dead last in opponent pass completion rate, allowing their opponents to get 73.1% pass completion rate, and they put 0 pressure on the quarterback with a 2.56 sack rate on the year, ranking them dead last at getting to the quarterback in the passing game. And like I said before, Seattle just coming off the gauntlet of all gauntlets. 3 games in 11 days, couldn't get a W on this one, so they're ready to win, and they're going to get their pound of flesh here versus an Atlanta team that is underperformed as a favorite at home versus non-division opponents. They are 8-26 and 1 ATS versus non-division opponents as a home favorite, dating back to 2014, 3-11-1 versus non-division opponents since 2023. I just think this Atlanta team's running a little too hot. We got a Seattle team that is just ready for a win. This team is fully capable of winning, and they love playing on dome surfaces. Give me Seattle. +3 is the play.
Absolutely great points. I will jump off it. The Guns said it, and it's very important to note here. This is your classic buy low Seattle, sell high Atlanta. And it's even better than that because it's so situational to the calendar, as Guns said. Seattle, 3 games in 11 days. We faded them correctly a few times. We knew it was coming. We bought Atlanta in this recent sample. 3 divisional games, another divisional game next week. Ultra sandwich spot here. And if you really look at what Seattle has done in the Geno Smith window here in the last couple years, they have performed great on the road, outside of division, at the NFC, going 4-2 ATS. And those 2 non-covers were a non-cover in New Orleans last year, where they outgained New Orleans, and a loss earlier this season at Detroit, 42-29. Key point on that game, Detroit beat them by 13. Seattle had 38 first downs in that game versus only 21 for Detroit. 17 more first downs. You shouldn't be losing that game. So this team's 4-2 in this spot, could be 6-0. And you speak on the Atlanta side for just a second here. These 3 wins, one of the softest divisions in football historically, and these 3 wins have been pedestrian to say the least. No offensive touchdowns against New Orleans, barely beat Tampa Bay in overtime, and last week took care of Carolina, one of the worst teams in the sport. This is where you want to buy a great spot for Seattle, and it is a collab play at 1 o'clock. Seattle +3. Let's dominate. Collab play number 2. We're going 1 o'clock to the New York area, East Rutherford in New Jersey. And we're taking the Giants at +3.5, finding the Eagles coming across here north in the state. And I'll throw it to the gun for some opening comments.
Yeah, we talk about stock prices here in terms of the NFL teams. The Giants are a stock that you got to buy right now, regardless of what happened to them last week on Sunday Night Football in that primetime loss versus Cincinnati. But they played very well on the defensive side of the ball. Looking at these 2 teams, splitting them up, we got a Giants team. They have a great defense, but not a good offense. We got when you look at the Giants, 29th in offensive scoring, only 16 points per game, and they're ranked 9th in opposing scoring, 20.2 points per game. And then you got to look at the Giants, ranked 25th in offensive red zone scoring percentage, but they're ranked 6th in opposing red zone scoring percentage. So you're seeing a yin and yang here, but the defense is really starting to progress, and I think the offense is starting to progress a little bit here too. When you look at the Philly side, Philly is ranked 18th in offensive scoring, 14th in opposing scoring, and they're also ranked 25th in offensive red zone scoring percentage, and they're 5th in opposing red zone scoring percentage. So yeah, both teams not really the best scoring teams, but they can hold their opponents to low scoring. And then what is the strength of the New York Giants? It's their pass rush. They're ranked number 1 in the league in terms of QB sack percentage. So there's going to be some pressure here on the Philadelphia Eagles. And then when these 2 teams meet, you always take the home team. 9-1 straight up in the last 10 meetings. Also, you got to look at the Giants, 11-5 ATS versus Philly dating back to 2016. And the Giants are 0-2 straight up in the division this year. They do not want to be 0-3. I just think this is a perfect Giants spot coming off the loss. And if you actually look at this, the ATS record when the Giants off a loss, 15-6 ATS in the last 21 positions. And you're playing your rival, you're playing them at home, you play their best there versus Philly, who has struggled scoring points, especially in the last 4 games. I got to take the Giants here. Give it to me all day long. There's 3s out there now. I got +3.5. That's my official play, but I think this team's going to win this game outright.
I couldn't agree more. A hat switch, an opportunity to dominate. The buy hat is engaged. And Guns mentioned this. I'll jump off of it. This is where New York Giants need a divisional win. I think even more importantly, they need a home win. This team is 0-3 at home. Got hammered in the opener against Minnesota. At the time, we thought that was a bad loss. Now that looks like perfectly fine. Minnesota looking great on this campaign. And their only home cover of the year was a divisional home game, primetime against Dallas, +5.5 in week 4, 20-15. And if you really go through the last 2 home games, probably could have beaten Dallas. Outgained them in the game. Couple funky plays left and right. Go back to last week, a game against Cincinnati. We had Cincinnati correctly, so we're not going to complain here. But we will tell you, if you watch that game film, Cincinnati did not overwhelm the Giants by any stretch. The Giants had more yards in the game. The Giants had 11 more first downs in the game. They missed 2 field goals. Now they get Malik Neighbors back. This is a divisional rivalry. Philadelphia has dominated this team for the last 25 years, going 27-7 straight up last 34. The Giants got them in week 18 last year. I think that's the start of upward movement. And speaking on Philly very briefly, Philadelphia went 24-4 from the beginning of 2022 to the middle of 2023. Absolutely scorching hot. It was a love affair. It was Nick Sirianni. It was Shane Steichen. It was Jonathan Gannon. Both coordinators leave after a Super Bowl run. Fast forward to last week. It looks nothing like that product. Barely beat Cleveland. Can't score the football. Locker room disruption. Sirianni trash talking the fans. This team is 4-7 straight up last 11. We talk about this every week with different teams in different games. The windows for success in pro football are small. Philadelphia had their run. It is over. And it is time for the Giants to step the hell up at 1 o'clock and get their first home victory of the season. Buy it, live it, love it, and let's dominate. Giants plus 3.5 early week. That's why you follow us on X for the real-time plays. Plus 3 now. We expect an outright victory. Big-time stuff continuing at 1 o'clock and continuing divisional football. Massive conversation here. I've been watching the media speculate on this game all week. It's called the game of the week in a lot of circles. Niners said, hold my beer on that. But nonetheless, 1 o'clock, Minneapolis, Minnesota Vikings on the money line, and a Detroit team total under. Guns picks, 2 officials in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Minnesota side here as much as anything. I mean, they're coming off the bye. They're going to be well rested, well repaired, and they're prepared, I should say, and undefeated on the year. They're 5-0. They're going against a Detroit team that's coming off a massive blowout, which we called. Credit to us. Detroit, they're 4-1 on the year after that big road win versus Dallas. Now, with the Detroit offense, they want to run the ball. That's how they establish. They're 6th in rushing play percentage, 8th in rushing yards per carry, and 4th in rushing yards per game. In the pass game, they're a little bit low on the pass percentages. They're 27th in pass play percentage, ironically enough. 3rd in pass completion rate, though. 1st in yards per play in passing. 21st in passing attempts per game, and they're 4th in passing yards per game. But 22nd in opponent INT thrown percentage. So they're susceptible to turnovers. This is going to be tough for a Detroit team that hasn't faced defense like the Minnesota Vikings, because Minnesota Vikings are number 1 in opposing rushing play percentage, 3rd in opposing yards per carry, 2nd in rush yards per game. Nobody runs on the Vikings. In the passing game, a lot of teams try to pass the ball against them. They're dead last in opposing pass play percentage, so a lot of teams are throwing the ball, but they're 4th in opposing pass completion rate, 5th in opposing pass yards per attempt, 1st in opposing interception thrown, and they're 8th in QB sack percentage. So when you see stats like that, it just tells you Minnesota always comes out swinging, and they get up so much that these teams are forced to pass the ball and get rid of the run game. And I think we may have one of those situations here. Also, you got to look at the 2x revenge here with Minnesota, both losing both meetings last year as 4 and 2.5 point dogs. And now they're favored here, but you got to look at who the quarterback was in those games. It wasn't Kirk Cousins. It wasn't even Josh Dobbs. It was Nick Mullins in both of those situations last year. So take that with a grain of salt. They had a -3 and a -2 turnover ratio in that game. And I don't think Sam Darnold is going to be like, do that to the Minnesota Vikings here. They're also 1-6 straight up in their last 7 games of the year in last year for Minnesota, to give you an idea how bad that team was when they had to play their back. Actually, I think they had to play Detroit two times in 3 weeks. I just think it's a bad spot for Detroit coming off that emotional win over Dallas on the road. Sunday game of the week. Now they got to carry that momentum versus Minnesota. And also there is going to be a trend, and I'll give that to Shark. They're on a back-to-back stretch on the road, and they have underperformed in those situations. So give me Minnesota money line as the play.
Yeah, a lot to unpack in this game, as I've seen a lot of people on the Lions. And what I really want to detail before I go to that statistical point, I want to look at the calendar for both teams. So the Lions, and let me just say this, anybody who's watched this show for 3 or 4 years knows we love the Lions. So if we're fading the Lions, take note. Look at the Lions calendar. Barely beat the Rams in the opener, went to overtime to win, then lost outright to the Bucs, then barely beat Arizona in Arizona. Got very fortunate on a couple sketchy calls to win that. Then got outgained, as I mentioned, by Seattle significantly. Seattle 17 more first downs in that game to win that one, and then beat a very poor home Dallas team last week. Dallas is not who we thought they were. Dallas is terrible, so that's a soft win. Seattle game, they got outgained, and the other 3 games, they almost lost all 3. So this is what we said last year at the back end of the year. Very similar to what I just said about Philadelphia. The ATS window for Detroit began in the end of the 2021 season. They were significant underdogs every week. Jared Goff caught wind, and they covered about 90% of games through the end of last season. It has shifted. And you go to the Minnesota side of this game, I want to look at this calendar too. People were talking to me this week. They said they're too hot. All right, let's have that conversation. At New York, blowout win. Come home. So they're hot on the road against a bad team, right? They get San Francisco. Beat San Francisco by 6. Okay, they beat San Francisco. Now they got to let down. Houston, great upstart team. Back-to-back home. This is going to be a loss. Nope. 34-7 blowout win. Okay, 2 home wins. 3-0, way too hot. They got to go on the division road, Green Bay. 28-3 in the first half. Okay. Division, 4 in a row. Now they got to go to London. Hammer down first half against the Jets. This team is beating out of conference, in conference, home games, road games, every situation you can find. And what I think it really comes down to, this team has a dog deeper than most inside of them. And that's a key point when you're going up against a Dan Campbell team, who is one of the biggest dogs in the league. This guy, Kevin O'Connell, is an elite psychological manager of this group. The team is behind him. He found Sam Darnold. We talked about this last week. Sam Darnold, when he started for the Jets as a rookie, was the youngest starting quarterback in NFL history. He's not old. He's younger than Joe Burrow. Keep that in the front of your mind about how young this guy is. He's been through hell and back with a couple other franchises. He's in his comfort zone now. This is a 3X revenge game, actually, Guns. They lost the last one in 2022 as well. They will be absolutely jacked. This has nothing to do with a bye week or anything. And the final point, as Guns was alluding to, in the last 2 years, 2.5 years, I should say, in the second leg of a road sequence, Detroit is 1-6 straight up. 1-6 straight up. Big road win, stay on the road, go in the division, get your ass kicked. We love Minnesota today on the money line, -125. My next play, going to Indianapolis at 1 o'clock as well, taking the Colts at -3. And I think this is an interesting spot because I think this is where we really discuss week to week what is bad contrarian. There are certain markets, there are certain handicappers, certain bettors across this country and world that obsess over underdogs just as bad as some people only bet favorites. And you will see syndicate movement. And the line is moving towards Miami in this game, and I literally am blown away by it. This is Tyler Huntley on the road. This guy has never been good as a professional quarterback. He was briefly propped up by a Baltimore Ravens run-heavy scheme and great defense last year and the year before. And you saw what he did in limited duties so far this year. Got absolutely blown out at home by Tennessee. This is going to be a far more difficult spot than a home game against Will Levis and Mason Rudolph. This is Shane Steichen, Anthony Richardson at Lucas Oil Stadium. And this is where Shane Steichen is 7-2-1 in his career in the last 10 at home at Lucas Oil. And something Guns and I were talking about before the show, Anthony Richardson was hurt most of last year, and he only has 2 career wins, both at home in their 2 most recent ball games against Chicago and Pittsburgh. Chicago and Pittsburgh are harder outs than Miami, and Miami barely beat New England last week before the bye on the road. Late touchdown, 15-10. I'm not entirely sure what the splits are in this game. This could be a public take. I honestly do not see a single ounce of merit to taking Miami here. I think Indianapolis continues upward movement in Anthony Richards' career. Take Indianapolis here at -3. We're going to throw it back to the Gun. Forgot to mention something in the Detroit game. Yeah. A beautiful conversation it is. Guns, Detroit team total under 25.5.
Yeah, it kind of correlates to our play with Minnesota here. So Shark talked about the trend of road back-to-back when it comes to Detroit. This kind of plays into the team total under, which I like here with Detroit. So we explained back-to-back, they always regress. Their average total in those spots are 14.1 points per game scored. Minnesota is currently ranked third in opposing score, and they're giving up 15.2 points per game and 12 points per game at home. And then you got Detroit currently ranked first in offensive scoring, 30.2 points per game. And they did that versus some really weak teams that give up a lot of points. We're talking about the Rams, 29th in opposing scoring. Tampa, 19th in opposing scoring. Arizona, 27th in opposing scoring. Seattle, 25th in opposing scoring. And Dallas, who's ranked 30th in opposing scoring. So these are all bottom feeders that give up a lot of points to their opponents. Then you got to look at Minnesota. Has not allowed more than 29 points to opponents all year. And that was due to a fluky second half, if you remember, when they got a big lead on the Green Bay Packers and kind of took their foot off the gas pedal and let Green Bay kind of trickle back into that spot. Then you got to look at Detroit team total. It's set at 24.5, 25.5, depending on what books you're getting at. That's 6 to 7 points below their season average and 10 to 11 points below their road season average. So that is a high indicator to me that we're looking at a position where Detroit probably not going to get a lot of points in this game. So if you can find a 25.5, great, because that's the number that I got. But take the under on the team total. If you got it at 24.5, still fine. Under the team total, 24.5, 25.5 is the play.
Yeah, speaking of unders, my only under of this week, 1 o'clock Lambeau Field, out of division football, out of conference football, Houston at Green Bay, taking the under at 47.5. If you bet that now, you'll get 48.5. And I think this is a very contrarian under. And I think it's a great spot to fade recent history. Last week, Houston scored 41 points at New England. And I just looked at my monitor here. Jacksonville just put 22 first half points on New England. So New England is a sieve all of a sudden on defense. And truly, this is not where CJ Stroud plays great offensive football in his career. Outside of that game last week, Stroud is 5-0 outside of the division on the road to the under. And he's very notably poor against the NFC and this year. This is the third time Stroud will be facing this division, the NFC North, this year. Week 2 at home, 19-13 under against Chicago. And week 3 at Minnesota, 34-7 under. And if you really go through some of these outcomes last year as well, only scored 19 points at Atlanta, 15 points at Carolina. This seems to be some mental thing that he has going on. He plays well at home. He plays well inside of the division. Outside of the division, sometimes outdoors, I should say. This is going to be Lambeau in October, not Energy Stadium in Houston in the warm indoor area. And if you go to the other side of this game, same dynamic with Jordan Love. Jordan Love exploded last week for 34 points against Arizona. It's a nice sell point there to where Jordan Love is 4-1 to the under in his career versus the AFC. And I really think you're going to see that merge dynamic where the public is really hot on this over. But what does the public always do pretty much? Look at the recent history and assume it has to repeat. I think it's a really nice spot to buy an under here at 1 o'clock. Take the under at 47.5 and throw it to the gun for some comments on Green Bay.
Yeah, I like the Green Bay side on this one. Kind of correlates to what you're saying about how CJ Stroud performs in these type of situations. And you got Houston coming off of like a little bit of a hot streak, 3 games in a row. But look who they beat: Jacksonville, New England, who we're watching now, and then Buffalo. But looking back at the outcomes of how these teams perform outside the conference since 2023. You have Green Bay versus the AFC. Their average point differential versus the AFC overall is +3 point differential, but at home, +6 point differential. And then on the Houston side versus the NFC, -2 point differential versus NFC overall, and -10 point differential when they have to face them on the road. Houston currently averages 16 points per game versus non-division opponents this season alone. And they're 2-4 ATS versus the NFC and 0-3 ATS on the road versus the NFC. And then on the other side, Green Bay 3-0 ATS versus the AFC at home dating back to 2023. Based on those statistics, also if you break it down to the total, like Shark liked, it does the same thing. It's all under type of trends, and the scores are very low, between 38 and 36 points per game. The total outcome happens in these situations. So I'm going to be taking Green Bay on this one as my play. Whatever the number is on this one, I got -2.5 currently. So if it gets a little bit lower, you might as well take them on the money line. But Green Bay will win this game, in my opinion. -2.5 is the play.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think, Stroud has underperformed in this position his entire career. Beating New England last week, truly not representative of much. Moving on to a couple more 1 o'clock games here. Interesting conversation. We always have conversation and analysis for every game. I go through detail in every single game, as does the gun, because we know some people want to bet games we might not have official plays on, but we will give you our angles. First one I want to open up here. Tennessee at Buffalo, 1 o'clock in Orchard Park. Buffalo laying a hefty -8.5, -9.5 across this week. Truthfully, I lean towards Tennessee here. Guns, do you have any thoughts?
I don't have it. I think the number is too high for me to go and jump on Buffalo at any point. I do think Buffalo wins the game, but is it going to be by the margin of the spread? I don't know about that one. I think one thing you can guarantee, if there's a good prop on this one, is just take Will Levis's over on his interceptions. Because that guy's he's guaranteed to turn the ball over pretty much every time he goes in there. And I would think that was probably the play I'd go with a prop. But as far as the game goes, this was just like, oh, I saw the line and I just passed on it, because I don't think anybody should be in a position to go take the Buffalo, whether it's home or away, as a favorite by more than 7 points. So I'm completely passing on the side, but I do lean towards the Will Levis over on his interceptions.
Just to clarify, Mason Rudolph is starting today.
Oh, well, if that's the case, then I'm good. I'm going to pass on this one. I told you I didn't look at this game at all, and there's a reason why. I saw that line, I said pass. So for me, nothing. I got nothing on that one.
Yeah, and I think it was actually due to injury. I think, Callahan here has been kind of sketchy with his comments. Like, in my opinion, he should just bench Levis, but he's still holding on here like, oh, no, it's only because he's injured, this, and that. I mean, I think that Rudolph is a better option at this point. But staying on this game very briefly, I think this is just a terrible spot for Buffalo. Buffalo actually, for whatever reason, has a brutal early season calendar, playing 5 out of 7 games on the road. And they're coming off of 3 consecutive road games, Baltimore, Houston, and the Jets. Big Monday Night Football win. Or was that, Monday Night Football win. And then they got to play Tennessee. Just a total bottom feeder at home before going to Seattle, West Coast game next week. This is the ultimate trap spot for Buffalo. And this goes back to the conversation of certain teams will hit windows of heat for small periods of time where we think, wow, this team is just that elite. And then basically as soon as we think they're elite, they flip back the other direction. There was a period of time going back about 2 seasons ago where you wanted to buy Josh Allen at home outside of the division every single week. Blowouts. He would come out with Stephon Diggs, this extremely fast-paced, aggressive throwing the ball offense, and they would obliterate teams. That is not the case now. Josh Allen hasn't thrown for he hasn't thrown for more than 220 yards in any game this year. It's a run-heavy scheme, totally different offensive coordinator, no Stephon Diggs, run heavy. This is truly where margin doesn't really exist with this team unless you're playing Jacksonville. They have one isolated blowout this year. It was week 3 Monday Night Football, 47-10. I don't think you can correlate Jacksonville to Tennessee. I think Tennessee has a better coach, first-year coach, far more motivation, better group, better camaraderie, and a better defense. And I think that ultimately when you look at what Tennessee has done in this window, Tennessee has played reasonably well in 3 of their 4 outright losses. They had a huge lead in Chicago and blew it late. And the other ones have been generally tight. I think this game is going to fall inside of 8 points. If you want to bet this game, which I'm not entirely sure how many people do, take the Tennessee side here and expect a game inside of 8. Guns picks. Talk to me.
The prop gun mind was just swirling as you were talking, and I kind of got inspired, and I had a little light bulb that went off my head, and I remembered this is the Buffalo Bills here. They stink against the running backs as far as passing and far as rushing goes. We took advantage of it in the prop gun with Brees Hall, and I think we can take advantage of it here with Tony Pollard because Tony Pollard's going to get a lot of the carries today. He's going to get a lot of the rushing. He's going to be there for the receiving because Tajay Spears is out. I think this is a good opportunity to be taking Tony Pollard props. I'm talking rushing attempts. I'm talking rushing yards. I'm talking rush receiving yards. I would hit as many of the overs on his stuff today and just hammer down on that one. But responsibly hand. We're talking about half a unit each on these ones. But I think the opportunity here is Tony Pollard overs. Situationally is going to be a good spot. I may even have some plays on this one. I just got to look at the numbers a little bit, which ones are the best ones. But Tony Pollard looking exciting for the prop gun.
Yeah, no, 100%. And our guys in the chat, Galen, what's up, brother? Let's dominate. Peter Gracia, Bob the Candy Man in the house says he's got Cooper to throw to. I want to make a comment on that. One of the biggest fraudulent narratives you unfortunately will hear that people will spew, I would say. They watch TV, they hear the headlines, the media hyper sensationalizes names, and they think that one random receiver who played for the Browns, who's in the later portion of his career, is going to change the architecture of this game. This is not going to change anything. There's going to be no camaraderie. I honestly don't think he'll be integrated in the scheme at all. As I mentioned, this scheme is not even really centered around wide receiver one at this point. It's much more over the middle, Josh run, hand the ball off. This is the polar opposite from the Bills 2 years ago. So I honestly think Cooper might have poor numbers with the Bills. I think their scheme doesn't match what he's going to do here at all. And he's older. What is he, 30, 31, something like that?
Yeah, he's in his 30s. Got to be, right?
Yeah, like this is just a classic big name, media sells you, and then he does nothing. I don't think this is going to have any effect at all. And I think the total in the game actually reflects that. The total is only 41.5. If the Bills were going to explode with Amari Cooper like old school Bills, those old school Bills would put up 40 points in this game alone. So I think this is going to be one of those just garbage games, like 23-15 or something like that.
He's 30 years old, by the way.
Okay, but regardless, for a wide receiver, that's
like as being 45.
Yeah, I was going to say that's like very late prime, very late prime. I mean, so and I even heard the media this week talking about the game. He had 265 yards last year.
Yeah.
But see, and that's what sticks in people's heads though, because they see that and they're like, oh, he's like so elite, and it's like he had one great game last year, awesome, And again, just don't take it for granted. When you move to a different team, it's a lot of moving parts. It's not fluid. So I think
you have to have chemistry with the quarterback. That's the thing. It's like you don't get that overnight. And I mean, it's going to be a different scenario here with Rodgers and Devontae Adams, because those guys have been worked together before. Those guys know each other. They probably even still work on the offseason. There seems to be a friendship there. That's a little bit different scenario. This one, those guys have never worked with each other. You don't know, I can't imagine a wide receiver. You have to understand their cadences. You have to understand their throwing velocity. You have to understand where they like to throw it. It's like you don't learn that overnight. So, yeah, I agree with you, Chuck. Don't get who cares if the guy's a high-profile wide receiver. It's going to take, maybe 3 or 4 weeks to him develop some camaraderie with his quarterback.
Oh, without question. And of course, we will get to that Jets game later. Last game at 1 o'clock here. Divisional football, I think an interesting game, 1 o'clock in Cleveland. Browns coming in here off a couple wins, showing signs of improvement. But I don't know if this is where they really perform particularly well at Cleveland in the Joe Burrow era. Guns, I have some notes on this. You have any opening thoughts?
I've been staying away from Browns games as much as possible because it's just until they make the switch at quarterback and bench Watson. There's something that's going on there, and I know it has to be an exuberant amount of money has been invested in this guy, and you feel obligated to play him, but he's ruining your team. He's ruining your offense, and if the fans know it, then the team knows it, and it affects the locker room dynamic. It affects the defense. It's a whole bag of it's a black cloud around the entire locker room, and it won't change until you make the switch. And I think people would welcome the switch, but it's not their decision to make. So all that being said, I've just made it, and I don't want to take anything because you think the Browns are in a bye spot eventually, right? That's usually how we go with these shows. But the Browns are never in a bye spot because they're just so inept on the offensive side of the ball. They can never stay in games. And it seems like it's just automatic that you take the other team and it cashes. But that's not capping to me. So I don't want to even have any involvement in this game. I'm going to throw it out the window. And if they make the change at quarterback, I'll revisit the Browns.
Yeah, when I was looking at this, it's a tough game, but I do think this could be a Cleveland side, actually. If you look at Cincinnati, they are 3-0 ATS on the road. Key point, though, all outside of the division. And oftentimes when you see teams that are running a clean sheet on the road outside of the division, then they go inside of the division, it does reverse. And Joe Burrow has performed very poorly in Cleveland in his entire career. I believe he's 0-5 straight up. And truthfully, in my opinion, if Cleveland covers this game, it's not really because Deshaun Watson does anything so unbelievably well or so unbelievably terrible. I think this is just the defense. I think the defense outdoors in, the second coming of the dog pound here in Cleveland can really get to Burrow. And I think this is desperation. And we've made some loose comments about maybe the coach in Cleveland is not the guy, Stefanski. Probably not the guy. But I think this team has enough professionalism about them, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, to rally themselves as players. And when you see Cincinnati last week, as we mentioned when we capped the Giants game, they weren't very impressive in that game. And now they got to go back-to-back road games off a primetime game in New York. Cleveland's going to be sitting here needing a win. And I think Cleveland has been reasonably close in some of these spots. Again, mostly defense and special teams. But if you go back to last year, Cleveland did hammer down against Cincinnati at home, and it was with Deshaun Watson, 24-3, week 1 last year. And late season, week 18, Cincinnati did hammer them at home big, -7.5. This opened at a neutral line, 4-3, something like that. Got steamed up. And this is where I would say, with the steam up to -5.5, I think the correct side is Cleveland. I have Cincinnati to win this game by 2, 3, 4, or 5 points. And this is pro football. These are sharp lines, but I really don't see Cincinnati winning this game by more than 5. So if you're taking this game, I don't think Cincinnati loses. Again, it's small margin stuff. I think it's a tight win, a tight win, and a non-cover. So that's just what I have on this game. So the intrigue of divisional football, 38 minutes in the books. Conversation is abundant here on this beautiful Week 7 Sunday. Just kicked back off in London. Life is beautiful. We see you guys in the chat. We're going to 4 o'clock here, and we're going to go big-time football right off the bat. 4:25, Levi's Stadium, Santa Clara, California. Chiefs at 49ers. We've been fading the Chiefs all year. We've lost a few units. I think this is where you want to stay the course with the right idea. And this has steroids attached to it from the points for the 49ers. The gun is on it. I'm on it. I'll throw it to the gun. San Francisco money line official.
Yeah, I'm just double checking the injury report because I had a few questions in here. It looks like Jahan Jennings is the only one that is the concern here on the injury side. But let's break down this game here. Kansas City versus San Francisco. It is the rematch of the Super Bowl. You have a 5-0 team coming in here for Kansas City, coming off their bye week. And, of course, everybody says, oh, Andy Reid after a bye, blah, blah, blah. We heard that trend before. And San Francisco's 3-3 on the year, off a divisional win versus Seattle. This team is turning up at the right time after a little bit of a slow start in the year. With KC, top 10 pass rush defense, they take but you can take advantage of them in a weak pass game. Their defense is ranked 26 in opposing pass play percentage, 20th in opposing pass yards per game, 25th in opposing INTs, so they don't get a lot of turnovers from the defensive side, and they're only 29th in QB sack percentage. So this is going to be a good opportunity here for a San Francisco 49er team that can pass the ball reasonably well. They're 16th in pass completion rate, second in passing yards per play, and second in passing yards per game. And then San Francisco is better on most of the key offensive statistical categories than KC. And that includes offensive scoring, offensive yards per game, offensive yards per play, third down conversion percentage, red zone percentage, and touchdowns per game. San Francisco on the offensive side, just a better squad. On the defensive side of the ball, both defenses are pretty good. Top 10 defensive rushes. They have their vulnerabilities in the pass game. But San Francisco is also top 10 in creating turnovers, where KC is ranked near the bottom 25 at creating turnovers. And there, yes, I talked about a lot of key injuries in this one. It seems like the guys we thought were going to play are going to play on this one, except for Jahan Jennings. So they should be okay as far as the personnel is concerned, because there is depth in the wide receiver position. Looking at the history, KC has just owned the San Francisco 49ers 4 straight matchups, including 2 Super Bowls. And in those spots, San Francisco was always the dog in those spots, every single one of them. Now they're the same. You're seeing him sitting here as a favorite for once at home. But San Francisco did not do well last year versus non-conference opponents, 2-4 straight up in ATS. But 3 of those were on the road. 2 were at home versus Cincinnati and Baltimore, which were AFC playoff contenders and Super Bowl contenders for that matter. And then they had KC in the Super Bowl. So take that with a grain of salt when you look at those stats. This year, different story. 2-0 straight up in ATS versus the AFC with a plus 15-point differential and a plus 75 net yard average. I think this is basically a San Francisco spot. KC, in every single game, you can say, oh, it was a ref's call that got him that win. Oh, it was a toe on the end of the end zone line that called it an incomplete pass when time expired. It's always something with KC. Eventually, we got to keep fading them. And I told this to Shark on Friday. I'm going to keep fading KC till I'm broke, because I just don't understand this team. I don't understand how they're winning games. I think their uniform should be changed from red and white to black and white striped at this point. This is not a KC spot. It's a San Francisco spot. So give me San Francisco money line as the play.
Absolutely. And just jumping off it, I did a video last year and I said the 49ers are the disruption. And what I mean by that truly is this team can beat anybody in the league, and they can beat anybody in the league by margin. And I think a really noteworthy point here was San Francisco. San Francisco is still only 3-3 straight up. So you want to buy this team. And if you go back to last year, they were actually 3-3 straight up weeks 3 through 8. So an identical sample. And then between weeks 10 and 17, they went 7-1 straight up at ATS. So 3-3 mediocre, 7-1 turn up all the way to the Super Bowl. Speaking of the Super Bowl, Guns mentioned it. San Francisco's lost 2 Super Bowls to this team in the last 4 years. And both of them, San Francisco had a late lead in the game. Go back to the Hard Rock Super Bowl in Miami pre-COVID. Kansas City outscored them 21-0 in the fourth quarter. Jimmy Garoppolo days. Last year, Purdy, final play of the game in overtime. McCole Hardman, walk-off touchdown. I believe that was the only walk-off overtime touchdown in the history of the NFL in the Super Bowl. Talk about being close to winning, number one. And number two, talk about excruciating loss. You know, you talk about these teams where you need to stir up some narrative to get your guys pissed off. This San Francisco team is going to be so ridiculously live today. This is the game of the year for them. It's a statistical buy low. And it's also, as Guns mentioned, a great spot to fade Kansas City. I was talking about this midweek, but only been 2 teams in NFL history in the last 50 years that ran the table. 72 Dolphins, 2007 Pats. I wasn't alive in 72, but I do remember the 2007 Pats. They were blowing teams out early season by 30 plus every single game. This Kansas City team is nothing like that. 1 possession wins 5 out of 6, I believe, or 4 out of 5. And the only one that wasn't was a game against the Saints. The Saints were only down 3 points in the fourth quarter. Derek Carr gets hurt, and the Chiefs score a touchdown to cover late. Chiefs have been unimpressive. Mahomes does not look great. The personnel is sketch. It's something we talked about when we detailed Kansas City becoming the new Patriots. They don't take these early season games that seriously. They haven't really played a lot of great ball recently. This is a turn-up spot. This is going to be a hammer-down spot. Final point on this. Last year, Kansas City played a rematch of the previous year's Super Bowl in the regular season against Philadelphia. Philadelphia did revenge the Super Bowl against Kansas City last year in Arrowhead. So if Kansas City can't hold at Arrowhead, what do you think they're going to do at Levi's Stadium? Take the Niners today. Big-time spot. Guns picks. More comments.
Yeah, you said walk-off touchdown in the Super Bowl. There's actually another one, and it was these guys right here, 28-3 comeback versus the Atlanta Falcons. That was a walk-off.
No, what I meant was on the final play of overtime, like the literal final play.
Yeah, that was a final play.
No point. There was 3 seconds in the game. Like it was about the.
I see what you mean. Okay, no, when you say final play in my mind, it's the walk-off touch. I got you.
No, that's what I meant. No, I agree with you. I was only saying it was like literally the last play in overtime. So I don't know. They would have. I guess if they didn't get it, they would have lost. Right. If they kicked a field goal, would have gone. We've never had double overtime in the Super Bowl. Crazily enough, that would have been sick.
That would have been awesome. Yeah.
Right.
I see what you mean, though. Okay.
Right.
Fair enough. Moving on.
Because there's definitely been some other walk-ups, I think, in the Super Bowl. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, the clarification is real, and let's dominate that one. My next play, 405, going to Washington, taking the over at 51, Carolina at the Commanders. And, when you start to look at this game, this is not particularly complicated. Carolina does not play any defense. The Carolina defense is giving up 33.8 points per game. And they have not shown signs of stopping anybody. Caleb Williams' career was basically awakened by this defense. And I think that Jaden Daniels is going to go absolutely nuts on this team. And you look at what Washington is doing against these totals. Washington is 5-1 versus the over. They're 1-1 versus the home over. But I think it's very important. They went over at home against Cleveland. Cleveland can't score the ball, and Washington still carried them over 34-13. And they're only under at home against the Giants 21-18. Very important stuff there. Washington kicked 7 field goals in that game. And Guns and I were talking about this the other night after we did the college show. Even more important about those 7 field goals, 6 of the 7 were inside of 33 yards. You guys know how hard it is to get in the red zone 6 times and go 0 for 6 and kick 6 chip shot field goals? That's hard to do. And the crazy thing about that, if they had even gotten 1 touchdown out of those 6 red zone trips, it would have gone over. Guns talked about it. The Giants actually have a good defense, great pass rush. Carolina has no defense. This is going to be wide open. I honestly think Carolina could keep this close. It's a bit of a trap game for Washington. Andy Dalton has moved the ball well on the road. I think you could see 70 points in this game. Guns, any comments?
Yeah, I actually like the team total over on this one. You can see it. I double-checked on my phone. It's 30.5 right now for Washington. I think this is the perfect spot. But the last 3 games, actually the last 4 games, they had 38, 42, 34. And then, of course, Baltimore last week was 23. The teams that they played on the defensive side were on the road, and they were decent defenses when they play at home. So this is a different spot for them playing at home. And you've seen what that team is capable of, even against a good Cleveland defense at home. Put up 34 points against them. And I just think this is a turn-up spot here for Washington coming off that loss to Baltimore. Kind of a little bit of a DMV rivalry, if you're from the area. And getting back to a position where they're playing a Carolina team that, as you said, Shark, gives up points in all types of situations. They give up 35 points per game on the road. So I think this is a Washington team with a better offense, better passing orientation. And I don't know if they got Brian Robinson back. That could be another key factor in that one too. I'll have to double check that one, see if he's healthy. But I like the over on the team total here for Washington, minus 30.5.
Yeah, no, 100%. And just jumping off a little bit further here, if you actually look at Carolina scoring the football, I think this is actually a nice buy low on Carolina. When Dalton took over in Vegas, going back to week 3, 36 points on the road. And I think a very important point about that game, that was Vegas coming off of a tight game cover at Baltimore. Washington is coming off of a tight game at Baltimore. And I think that's a really key point. There's a lot of narratives about after you play the Niners, after you play this team, that team. It's very real. After you play Baltimore, the next week is a tough game for you to get up for. The physicality of the Baltimore game is huge. And interestingly enough, Carolina's only outright win this year and their only ATS cover was the game at Vegas after Vegas played at Baltimore. I think there's something to that. So I don't think that Washington's going to play a poor game. I just think that the defense is going to be awful. And I think that when you look at what Dalton is doing in terms of his score flow here, 36 points, 24 points against the Bengals, really bottomed out against the Bears on the road last week with 20. So if you think about that from a statistical arc, he bottomed out and now he's coming back up. I really see this game somewhere along the lines of like 38-35 Washington. Just my take. I think Washington getting up for this is going to be tough after the Baltimore game last week. So
I just threw the team total out there because we know what Washington is going to score some points on this one. And some people are a little bit hesitant to take a 51.5, 50. If you got it early in the week and you got it under 50, that's great. But if you want to just take it a different direction, go team total over for Washington. And maybe even Carolina. Go check that number too. I think both teams will score points, especially Washington's defense is not good defending the pass.
No, I agree 100%. Just comment on the lines. Letting the books tell you a story. The two games that Washington played at home this year, the lines were 42.5 and 43.5. So it's not so much that books moved it up. So now you have space and value on the under. This is the books telling you we had it at 42.5, 43.5. This is going to be a ridiculously high scoring game. And the Carolina road lines have all been under this too. This is the highest line of the year for both teams in this situation. This is going to be like a college football game, I think. 38-35, something like that.
Yeah, red zone's going to be busy. You're going to see a lot of Commanders highlights and Landover. That's pretty much what we're going at.
Without
Chris
question.
Hansen will be like going back to the Washington game every 2 seconds.
Oh, I know. It'll be a great game to watch, no doubt. Staying at 4 o'clock, and that isn't over at 51.5 for those that are tailing that. And please do. It is a beautiful look there. 4 o'clock, 4:05, Raiders, Rams. This game, in my opinion, honestly could be the worst game of the entire slate. I think this game is worse than Tennessee Buffalo. I think Tennessee Buffalo is number 2, but I think this is probably the number 1 worst game on the slate. Guns, any thoughts? I don't know. I got some stuff, but any thoughts?
With the Rams, there's going to be a time where we're going to be able to buy on the Rams, and I think it's when they get 100% healthier. I know that Cooper Kupp still listed as questionable. Puka Nacua is still on the IR. If you go look at their depth chart, it's just a lot of IRs next to their names. I don't know when a lot of these guys are coming back, but it's like with the Rams, it's just never a buy spot. They can't stop the run. They've been gashed on the run against everybody. But you're going against a Raiders team that doesn't run the ball well anyway. So what is it going to be? Is this going to be a passing game, or it's very confusing on where these two teams stand currently. Even with the Raiders, just giving up a ton of points to Pittsburgh of all teams, they gave up 32 points to them. I mean, Pittsburgh can't score at all. So this team is kind of lost directionless. Maybe looking to possibly what's the prop on the next coach fired? Maybe Pierce is going to be somewhere in that element. Who knows? But both teams are kind of not playing great ball, not even in a buy spot. This is a complete pass for me. I have no idea what to do with this game.
Yeah, no, it's brutal. I mean, you want to buy the Rams at some point, but I think this is still not a great spot for the Rams.
Yeah.
Still no Cooper Kupp, no Puka Nacua, and they get a short week look ahead. They play Minnesota on Thursday Night Football.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this game is not an inspiring spot. I think the number might be inflated. It's gotten steamed up significantly from open. Of course, Vegas doesn't look very good. Team in shambles. Antonio Pierce, I mean, we said it in preseason. He's got that dog in him. But I think the secondary point on Pierce, does he have any scheme? Or is it just like a barking dog trying to get energy, but no thought or scheme? Because they look terrible. I do think 1 point outside of the fact this is a trap spot for the Rams that has some merit potentially to taking Vegas. Aiden O'Connell, the current starter for Vegas here, last year was actually 3-0 ATS on the road as an underdog, which I think holds some weight. It's the same quarterback and it was the same coach. So getting points on the road, Aiden O'Connell clearly playing for contracts. You have to remember that with some of these backups, particularly younger backups, these guys are not necessarily playing for the Raiders. They're playing for their own future in the league. And I think you're going to see a reasonable effort here from Aiden O'Connell today. He's kind of a gunslinger. A lot of these young quarterbacks are like this. Nick Mullins, Jake Browning. You get in there, and they're gunslingers. And the gunslinger comment is very much connected to what I just said. They don't want to get in there and throw screen passes for 4 yards. They're trying to get it downfield, air it out, so other teams see them and sign them to contract. This is basically a tryout game for O'Connell today. So keep that in mind. I think you might see more points in the game. I think it could be an over. And I think the Rams might not bring their biggest effort looking ahead to Minnesota, which, again, is not just Rams versus the best team in the NFC right now. It's also McVay versus his old coordinator, Kevin O'Connell. So huge emotional game coming up on Thursday Night Football. So don't love the Rams as much as they will bounce back. They got to get healthy first, and they have to find a better spot than fading Aiden O'Connell playing for a contract where he's already 3-0 ATS on the road last year as an underdog. So really a grease fire game. We're definitely not telling you guys to bet this officially, but be careful with the Rams. I think it's not as good of a spot as people want to make it into. Moving on, big game here, 8:20 p.m. in Pittsburgh. Massive stuff tonight. I can't wait to watch this one. I dropped an official on it. Guns Picks has thoughts. I'll throw it to the gun for some thoughts, and then I will jump off with some official remarks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm leaning towards that. I think this is the Jets play or pass on this one. Jets coming off that loss to their rival Buffalo, 23-20. Just weird circumstantial stuff that happened in that game. Kind of gave basically, as Rodgers said in the press conferences, we gave them that game, and that was a fact on that one. Looking at the offensive versus the defense here with Pittsburgh's offense versus the Jets defense. Of course, we're going to have a new starter here for Pittsburgh. It looks like it's going to be Russell Wilson taking over the reins. Second in offensive rush play percentage, second in rushing attempts, the Pittsburgh Steelers are 9th in rushing yards per game. They're going against a defense in the Jets that are great against the run, 9th in rush yards per carry, 24th in opposing rush attempts per game, 17th in opposing rush yards per game. And then they're not going to be able to pass versus this Jets defense. They have one of the best pass defense in the league. They're top 5 in all the key statistical categories: opponent passing completion rate, passing yards per play, passing yards per game, and QB sack rate. When you look at the other side there, Jets want to pass the ball. And of course, with Rodgers and having Devontae Adams in there, they're going to be passing this ball a lot. They're third in pass play percentage, third in pass attempts per game, and they're 16th in passing yards per game. I think that's going to improve with the new weapon in Devontae Adams. Defensively, ranked top 10 in most key statistical categories against the rush, but the pass, they're susceptible of giving a lot in the pass for Pittsburgh. 22nd in opposing pass play percentage, 15th in opposing pass completion rate, 13th in pass yards per game, and their 18th sack rate. They're 20th in offensive scoring, but 22nd in opposing scoring, and the same thing is direction on that one too. So you have two offenses really that are not good at scoring, but they're pretty good at stopping teams from scoring against them. Both teams are under teams, by the way. You want to use that category, and both went over their total last week. So I lean towards the under as well in this type of spot. And also with the reffing crew that's going to be in there, it's not, I'll say this, it doesn't weigh heavy towards the Pittsburgh side. It's more towards the Jets side. So yeah, Jets are the only play I'm going to go with this one. If I'm going to take it, I'm going to take the money line.
Yeah, this is a great spot for the Jets. And our guy in Brooklyn says, Jets hype is running in New York, and for good reason. For good reason. I think this is really, I haven't been dropping multi-unit plays this year, but in my opinion, this could be a multi-unit play for the Jets. First point on the Jets, 3 straight losses coming into the game. None of them were bad losses, and every one of them, they could have won the game. It's a beautiful buy low. Blew it in the second half to Denver, 10-9. Could have won that game. tight one against Minnesota and London. Minnesota is obviously a very high-class team right now. That's not a bad loss. And then last week against Buffalo, outgained Buffalo pretty significantly, 393 to 359. 2 missed field goals in the second half. Jets could have won that game, so buy that. And I think situationally here, the psychology of this game is very interesting, and it's a beautiful buy Jets, sell Steelers. If you look at what the Jets are doing here, it's everything you want to buy. New head coach, inspired group with a new head coach, new play caller, elite defense, and they just acquired Devontae Adams, which is, as Guns mentioned when we were talking Amari Cooper, really the polar opposite to the Amari Cooper trade. Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers, I don't know if they're best friends, but they're certainly very close. They love playing together. They have a great on-field rapport. This is going to work immediately, and it's going to work great, not only on field, but in the locker room. It's another positive juice point for this group. And the desperation is real. They cannot lose this game. 2-4 straight up. You can't go to 2-5. And I think very importantly here, the Jets are actually 1-0 as a road favorite this year outside of the division, beating Tennessee on a -3 line, 24-17. And you talk about the psychology of Pittsburgh, polar opposite, in my opinion. Justin Fields was playing good ball, not great ball, given his skill set. But the team is 4-2. They're far better than Kenny Pickett version last year. The team seems to like Justin Fields. He's a younger guy, more so in the age group of most of their regular players, which does hold a lot of weight in professional sports. A 34-year-old doesn't connect with 23-year-olds as good as a guy in their actual generational window. Tomlin taking Justin Fields off the field here to replace him with Russell Wilson, in my opinion, is an absolutely terrible move. Inexcusable, in my opinion. I think Wilson is completely over the hill. He looked terrible in Denver. He played okay last year with Sean Payton against a lot of bad defenses in games that didn't matter. And I think psychologically this group is confused by the move. And I think it's a really skeptical move that's very much centered on the fact that Tomlin had declared Wilson the starter before week 1 when he got hurt. And now Tomlin, I think, is stubbornly saying he was the starter before. We have to put him back in. And something that I was talking about in my group chat midweek when this came out, go back to the 2001 Patriots. Drew Bledsoe was the starter. He got hurt the game after September 11th against the Jets at the old Foxborough Stadium. Thank you, Mo Lewis. Thank you, Jets, for that. But I will say this. Tom Brady came in, and Tom Brady in his first year was not throwing the ball 5,000 yards to Randy Moss. The scheme of the 2001 Patriots was run heavy, it was conservative, and it was a lot of short passes. Very similar to what the Steelers are running. But here's the key point. Belichick sensed a good energy with Brady and the group and the beginning of a journey with a young quarterback, with a young group, which is exactly what Justin Fields is with this group. And he said to himself, our starter's good. He went to the Super Bowl a handful of years ago in 96. You know, Parcells loved him. Kraft loves him, all this stuff. I'm the guy. I'm the coach. I'm Belichick. I trust energy. This is Brady's group. We're not putting Bledsoe back on the field. Putting Wilson on the field is so egregious. I mean, I could say it's a fireable offense. I mean, like, because you guys know I love psychology. I think this is so beyond the wrong move and disruptive. And I think the Jets are going to take significant advantage of this. And the final point on this, Pittsburgh has 4 wins. They beat Atlanta. They beat Denver. They beat the Chargers with an injured Justin Herbert. And they beat Las Vegas. A lot of soft wins there. And the fact that Pittsburgh lost to Dallas at home in primetime, I think the Jets are significantly better than Dallas. I think the Jets could get there with some margin tonight. This is probably the Jets coming out party. And I saw somebody, our girl Taylor Mathis, post on X before. She said, I'm so tired of the Jets. And I commented, I said, this is just the beginning of the Jets.
Yeah.
Welcome to the party, Taylor. Come on, get behind them. Guns, so you're officially on this?
Yes, I am. I'll Jets money line for sure. That's the only way you're going to go with this one. I also lean towards the under as well. I think the opposing scoring is circleable in this event. And knowing that Russell Wilson is going to be the starter in this one, I've already seen the sample size, what he did with Denver. It's not going to be much different here. They're going to run the ball probably as much as they did with Justin Fields. If they try to pass the ball with Russell, he does not throw it long anymore. He's always dink and dunk, trying to throw it low. It's a bad spot here for Pittsburgh. I mean, making a QB change for really no reason, in my opinion, and then it's not going to bode well here for the Steelers. Yeah, so I lean towards the under, but I'm gonna be official on the Jets.
100%. Jets -1.5 official. That will be a collaboration play. And as I said, I don't give out multi-unit plays here because one thing that I don't like to do is tell people how much to wager. That's for you to decide yourself. We give you the plays. You decide how much you like the plays yourself. We're not going to manage your money for you, but this is really a multi-unit type of play. Monday Night Football, tomorrow night, doubleheader. A bunch of good teams, actually. I'm very intrigued by tomorrow night's games. First one here, 8:15 in Tampa. Baltimore laying 3.5 to the Bucks. A lot going on here. Guns, any thoughts?
Yeah, this is well, what I'm looking at here is like I'm starting to dig into the props a little bit more on this game and not so much focused on the side of the total yet. I'll probably get to something by Monday or at least before the tip off, maybe even tonight. But liking the passing props here with Lamar Jackson. I think if you can get an over 228.5, I think that's what the line's set right now. It's just I think it's a good spot. He's turned up in the last two games. He put up 345 and 308 in the passing game versus Cincinnati and Washington. And if you look at the numbers against good offenses, Tampa is susceptible against the pass. 324 given up to Detroit, 477 given up to Atlanta. And then the other teams aren't necessarily passing teams, except for Washington, but that was week 1 with Daniels in his first start. So you got to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. I will probably be more leaning towards the prop on this one with Lamar Jackson. May even be a prop gun play. I do not know if I'm going to make that my primetime play, but I do like the over passing yards there for Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, this is a tough game. I don't know what to make of this one, to be honest with you. The one thing that I don't really like about this game, to start off, is the last time Baltimore played in Tampa, they did win the game 27-22. And it was a primetime game 2 years ago, Thursday Night Football in October of 2022. But point there is, oftentimes when you see a team with the same quarterback beat a similar group by 5 in this stadium, and now the line's 4, books are basically telling you that is what we think is going to happen again. So I think you're hovering in a very sharp environment here. I don't really love buying Baltimore in this spot. Obviously, 4-0 last 4. A lot of, I would say, impressive wins. Obviously, blowing out Dallas early, holding on there in week 3. Blowout of Buffalo at home. Huge comeback in the division at Cincinnati. And then a cover last week against Washington. Every one of those wins is impressive in its own right. So I think there is a bit of an inherent letdown here. And they do have to go to Cleveland next week for a divisional road game on a short week. It's not as bad as the Rams spot on Thursday Night Football. Obviously, next week on Sunday, there is a little bit more time there. I still don't really like the spot. And I think this is where Baker Mayfield does show up. You guys know Baker is very emotional. He definitely plays to the spot. You saw him get crushed at home against Denver and then come back and hammer Philly. So if Baker cares about the game, he will play. And I think unavoidably he will care about Monday Night Football against Lamar Jackson. That all being said, I think the line's sharp. I would probably lean towards Tampa Bay if I was playing this, like a free play or a small play or something like that. But you think Tampa Bay lean or anything?
I don't have anything on this one. I'm just I'm looking at how these teams perform home versus road. It seems like the totals are a little bit lower on the home side for Tampa this year, and then on the other side for the away, higher totals for Baltimore. The only thing I like is that passing prop right now. Anything on the side, nothing. Right now I got nothing. I got to dig into it a little bit further. This is one that I have just kind of like, okay, well, I'll look at this Sunday night, see if there's anything. But yeah, the only thing I looked at was the prop.
Yeah, I agree. Tough game. Other Monday night game tomorrow night. I think this was a flex game. I'm not sure if this was originally scheduled for Monday night, but 9:00 in Arizona. Chargers at Cardinals. This should be a really interesting game. I think this is going to be a back and forth game. I think you're going to get a good effort from the Cardinals. They seem to kind of play up and down week to week. Obviously got crushed last week in Green Bay, beat the Niners the previous week. We've seen them beat the Rams by 31 points. We've seen them compete well in Buffalo. We've seen them get hammered against Washington. But the point is, I think Arizona inherently will bounce back. It's what they do. However, I don't really like fading the Chargers in any capacity. As long as Justin Herbert is at least 70% healthy, with this coach, I think this team is just always a buy team. And I think that's why you're seeing steam. The Chargers have been getting steamed in the market all week. It was about a pick 'em. Now it's -2, 2-3. It's gone down to 1, but it's hovering in that zone, which is a Chargers buy take. These teams did play 2 years ago in Arizona. Chargers did win the game 25-24. I think that is kind of what you're going to see here. I think you're going to see a very tight result. I would say Chargers probably win. I don't mind Chargers money line. I think the under has some merit here. I think this is what you're seeing with Jim Harbaugh. And these guys, they play great defense. They slow it down. They run the ball. And Arizona has shown the ability to not score the football for a handful of weeks in a row. Only put up 13 against Detroit. Got, 24 against San Francisco late. Nothing last week against Green Bay. The under in this game is probably the best take, in my opinion. And the line does agree. That game 2 years ago, 25-24 on a 49 line, did push, actually, the total. This comes down to 43.5 at open, which is a pretty significant downtick in points. I have this game to finish right around 38 points. Guns, any thoughts?
I'm with you 100% on this one. I think this is an underlook for sure. You look at the scoring totals for Arizona last 4 weeks, 13, 14, 24 against San Francisco, and then 13 versus Green Bay last week. So, yes, they have issues scoring the rock. And then on the defensive side, it's the Chargers only give up 13 points per game. They held Kansas City to 17. They held, Denver put up 23. Actually, no, they held Denver to 16. They held Carolina to 3. Las Vegas to 10. Granted, these are not the best teams in the world, but Arizona is not a strong suited scoring team either. But I think if they can run the ball, which you can run the ball against Arizona, they give up 4.7 yards per carry per game. And the last 3 weeks, the running game has really been struggling for the Chargers, but they played top 10 rush defenses in Pittsburgh, Kansas City, and Denver. So take that with a grain of salt. When they actually had to play a team that was bad at the run, like Carolina and Vegas, they put up over 5 yards per carry in both of those games. So I think they're going to run the ball. They're going to control the clock, time of possession, score methodically, and it's just going to be a long, just boring game because the Chargers defense will be rested. They'll go out in the field, they'll make their stops, and it'll be low scoring. So, yeah, if they had a lean on this one, it'd be towards the under.
Yeah, so I think probably the under best look. Chargers probably win the game. I haven't seen anything from the Chargers that would make me think they lose. Their only bad performances have come when Herbert was significantly injured. Obviously, second half in Pittsburgh, and then the KC game where he was really hobbling around. And even that game was really tight. KC with a fourth quarter touchdown. So probably Chargers and the under. Minute 13 in the books. NFL, the extra points. The big show, week 7. The shark and the gun. My official plays. Indianapolis -3. Collab plays 4 of them this week. Seattle +3. Giants +3.5. 3. Minnesota money line. And San Francisco money line. The gun also likes Detroit team total under 25.5. I have under in the Houston Green Bay game, 47.5. Over 51 in Landover, Maryland. Carolina at Washington. And tonight, another collab, Gun, I believe you did go official with the Jets.
Yep. Throw it on there.
So 5 official plays. Jets, I'm on 1.5. He's on the money line. It's basically the same play. We talked about that game for like 8 minutes. That is a banger of a play tonight. I'm probably going to go bigger on that. Just as I said, you guys need to manage your money. We're not financial managers for you. We tell you the plays. We tell you what to do. Be responsible always, but know when to press the right bets as well. It's always balancing that point. So we appreciate you guys immensely. I know the game's on in London. You guys are tuning in with us. Over 1,000 live viewers. We appreciate you guys immensely. We get up early to bring you guys the top energy, hype, analysis, and picks. Have a great day, everybody. Cash the damn tickets. Guns picks. A pleasure as always. Close them out with some words, and let's dominate.
Yeah, shout out to the chat as they came in there. We got Chad, Bob, the Candy Man Can, Sean Murphy, Christopher Boucher, Zach, Sam, just going down the list. Johnny King in the building, Peter Grasny, True Gun Disciple, of course, Galen Betts joining the chat as well. And all you beautiful bastards, Cody, Soundmake, and BK11. All you guys, thanks. Appreciate you guys getting into the chat. Tyler Ferguson trolling me a little bit with the crying at the KC refs. I wasn't crying about the refs. I just think they get favoritism over a lot of these teams in these key situations because it's a TV thing. They want to get the ratings up and they want KC in the playoffs. That's all I'm saying. Anyways, I digress. This is a beautiful show. Make sure you check out all our social media platforms at Guns Picks and at Sharks in Sports 88. And check us out on YouTube at Guns Picks channel and the Sharky Waters Nation channel on YouTube. And we will be back once again for the Thursday NFL show, Knowledge for College on Friday, and of course, back Sunday for the extra points at 10:30 a.m. And hopefully we will have the odds fellow. We shall see for that one. But that's going to do it for the extra points. Week 7 edition. Let's cash some tickets. Let's dominate the board. And as always, yep, let's keep dancing. Yeah, bang.